Thanks for coming to listen today. We'll be talking about Kanise Khumi, which is a language spoken in Chin State, Myanmar. The number of speakers is unknown, but an internal census based on ethnicity counted around 5,776 ethnic Kanise Khumi. It's a South Central Tibeto-Burman language, otherwise called Kuki Chin in a lot of literature, and it's part of the Southwestern group, which includes Bangladesh Khumi, Baladan Khumi, Remija, Mokimi, Lemi Chin, etc. So as we work with Kanise Khumi language development leaders in the role of advisors and consultants, trying to help them as they test their orthography, we've become quite interested in the vowel distinctions and the number of diphthongs in this language. And motivated by quotes like these from Lutvin et al., it seems there's a lot that can be contributed in terms of descriptive work with respect to vowel quality distinctions, where we can provide some evidence for perception and acoustic phonetic analysis, and in the area of diphthongs, being able to describe some phonotactic restrictions and diachronic changes, and we'll take these in that order. So first, I'd like to talk a little bit about what we know about perception of diphthongs and vowels in this language. We've mostly worked with one speaker and two others, but Ezra, he's around 50 or so. He recorded a word list that's over 2,000 words together with Joe Bryant, and Ezra spelled each one of the items from this word list. So that gives sort of an emergent sense of his judgments for the vowel system based on what seems to be an adaptation of the Baladan Khumi orthography. Then this year we worked together online using a rhyme sorting activity similar to what Shane talked about, where he said they used pictures to sort things, but in this case I used the recordings that Ezra had made in 2019 and took like individual tokens. I put a lot of audio icons on a PowerPoint slide and just had 4 boxes, and he was separating into groups. So, you know, every word that ended with a particular vowel, he would try to find the distinctions. There were 3 participants in that activity, Ezra and 2 other gentlemen. But as sometimes happens in these communities, one person's voice speaks the loudest and the others defer to their judgment, and Ezra is sort of the literacy expert for them, the most experienced writer, that sort of thing. So often it was his judgment, and then we could sort of see a difference or similarity to his judgments in 2019 when he first wrote the same words. Okay, so I did that in 3 groups, as you see here in this list, always keeping the same tone so that the only thing they're sorting for is really the vowel quality at the end of a word. And then I did another activity where I played a group, which should all be the same rhyme, and then just listening to make sure that every item in that group is the same, or are there outliers that they thought should be taken out of that group. So in that case, we're also confirming the distinctions. So the perceived vowel system from these results include 8 monophthongs, 5 closing diphthongs, and 3 fronting diphthongs. And the monophthongs, as we did that, you can see the box around O and A. That's because that's where there was the least reliability between 2019 and 2024, and also the greatest confusion as we talk about the decisions, like, well, that one could be either O or it could be A, or some people say it O, some people say it A. So there's already a little bit of a sense that this needs to be explored further, which we find with the acoustic analysis, no distinction in Ezra's speech between the 2. There's something else like A, but it only occurs in one version of the word yes, in indirect speech, and in hortative verb particles. So it seems to be some kind of pragmatic lengthening, perhaps, and we don't have acoustic data for that to talk about today. It's something we're still exploring. So I'd like to talk about the acoustic phonetic perspective now. From this large word list, we selected words that had monosyllables, sesquisyllables, or disyllabic words. And of those, we took the ones that ended with an oral vowel, not a nasal coda. So the nasal could, in these isolated words, is actually just a nasalized vowel. But when you see it in non-final position, you can find an plosive there in the coda. All right, so these are the numbers for each vowel that we had. You can see here that the central vowels here, we had the least amount of data. So most of that's like unclear. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about that today. To prepare the data, we removed outliers per vowel if there was a greater than 3 standard deviations from the mean for either F1 or F2. And then we normalized normalized time between 0 and 1, but we first excluded the first 15% of the vowel to exclude co-articulatory effects, and plotted these with plot 9 Python ported GV plot. To look at the diphthong trajectories, we computed them as 4 ordered points, because for diphthongs, we're really talking about dynamic change over time. And the vowel durations were binned in 4 phases. We took the median of each phase for each token for each vowel, and used geoplot path to plot that. In diphthong ellipses, which you can see with a 95% confidence interval. Monophthongs, we took the median for each token and each vowel. And you'll see here our results differ a bit from the perceived system. Right here you can see we found only O, we didn't find 2 vowels there. So that leaves us with a rather symmetrical 7 monophthong system. And then we did find these 5 closing diphthongs and 3 fronting diphthongs. And I'll show you here the scatter plot for the monophthongs, where you see F1 on the y-axis and F2 on the x-axis, and you can see here the relations between these 7 monophthongs. If I take the red out of the way, it's probably easier to see the color. All right, then we have this really interesting 8 diphthong system, where you see the 2 closing diphthongs that also move front, and you see 2 closing diphthongs in the back that retract. The central one goes close, and then we're calling these the 3 fronting, we, boy, and I. It's really hard to move this around. Like something about front and back and left-handedness is not working with me. Okay, so let me move that out of the way. If we take these 2 together, you can see the vowel space is like really full, and interestingly enough, all of the monophthongs serve as like the origin or the target for a diphthong. And then you've got this interesting space here, which could have been occupied by monophthongs, but is occupied by diphthongs. Duration is not a feature between the monophthongs and the diphthongs, but it is a feature of the tone system. As you see here, this shorter tone is the mid-glottalized tone. And that is something I talked about in 2021 when I was looking solely at monosyllables, which are all nouns. So that's confirmed again in this study. Let's look now at line plots to get a little bit more detail on the diphthongs. So for the fronting diphthongs, we're looking here at F2 values, which would be showing us the change in front backness. And you can see the rising slope in F2 demonstrates the fronting diphthongs, we, oye, and a. I forgot to mention when we saw the picture before, that was the black arrows. It looked like we started in the central part and went forward, not back, but that is partly also related to the fact that we took the 15% off at the beginning, and there you often found it starting further back. Even so, it still can be further forward than we might expect. Now we look at the back vowel series, oo, o, and all. So this one we see a rather level front F1 value, which is helping us understand the vowel height, right? So we have these two level monophthongs and then the falling slope on the diphthongs, which shows us that they're closing. The vowel is raising through as the time progresses. You also get this backward trajectory because we see with the F2 value as that goes down and the two diphthongs, then that's showing us that the tongue is moving back. For the front vowel series with E, A, and E, those have in the F1 value, which is an inverse relationship with vowel height. So as those fall, that's showing that those two are closing diphthongs. But then we get this interesting, like really steep rise at the very end, which we don't have an explanation for. And then those front ones, you can see that they're also moving forward by looking at the F2 values, which rise steeply for the two diphthongs that are both closing and moving more front. Now we'll turn to the diachronic perspective.
Okay. Yeah, so we're also interested in exploring how this diversification of vowels happened in Kanise. This is the reconstruction of Proto-Kukichin by Vinvik, and it's a comparatively simple vowel system if you just look at the reconstruction of the vowels themselves. So we have these two opening diphthongs, which we don't find in Kanise, and 5 monophthongs. But it is more complicated than it seems if you combine the coda glides that Vinvik analyzes. So there actually are more phonetic diphthongs in Proto-Kukichin than it might seem by just looking at the vowel. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention while vowel length contrast is present in Proto-Kukichin, it was just sort of generally lost in Kanise, so without any sort of compensatory effects. So yes, we've seen the diphthongs of Kanise Khumi, and so we recognize they are different. So a big factor in this is coda deletion, which has been quite extensive in Kanise. Oral stops have been deleted entirely, often with a tonal implication, giving us the glottalized midtone in most cases, but not always. So there are other factors that we haven't identified yet. And then the nasal codas, they have collapsed. They don't have a place of articulation contrast anymore. Here we're marking them as nasalization, like over the vowel, but more accurately, we've been deciding that we should probably call it a segmental nasal for various reasons we can't talk about right now. But anyway, it's marked as nasalization here. So the Kanise vowel inventory grew with loss of coda consonants for a few reasons. One of which is in the absence of other codas, you start to lose good reasons to interpret the closed vowels as codas at all. And also, we've got these new non-closed diphthong targets, which sort of, they're not really interpretable as approximants anyway. So we end up with a ballooned vowel system when we lose the option to mark codas like that. And this is not just Kanise, this is in other southern area Kuki-Chin or South Central languages, and the phenomenon is frequently encountered throughout, so it's about this kind of proliferation of vowels with coda loss, so nothing surprising. Okay, so there are some of the diphthongs of Proto-Kuki-Chin monophthongized. So ua and ia, both monophthongized. It's to back and front monophthong. So here we've got examples of ua monophthongizing usually to o, sometimes to u. And then we've got the ow rhyme, which has just, in most cases, just lost the target close vowel, the u. And then we just get ah reflexes in most cases. But not always. We get a few aberrant ones. So this is not as regular as the other sound changes we've tracked. So yeah, that summarizes that. So we've got some diphthongs that are now monophthongs. I should have removed yeah from there, shouldn't I? Yeah. Okay. Then we have some diphthongs that remain diphthongs in Kanise. So o and ui, or oe and ui, I should say, they have merged as this new oa diphthong, which is nothing spectacular, but and then ui kind of remains ui. We just, it's just transcribed differently now, although its numbers were swelled by the inclusion of ul, where there's sort of a tendency for coda ul to vocalize and become a close vowel target like e. So I is pretty much the same, except well, we don't know exactly what the target vowel height was of the reconstructed I, but in any case, in Kanise, it's certainly not a high target. It's more like in the A vowel space. So it sounds like I today. And yeah, here's ia. Ia was a diphthong, and it became a diphthong again as this A lower front diphthong. We hypothesize it's changed direction, right? So ia is opening, A is closing. So we assume there was probably a monophthong in a middle stage there that then went on to diphthongize, and that would be symmetrical with ua going to o. So it's all working out pretty nicely. So a summary of a few of the diphthongs that remain diphthongs in Kanise. The fronting diphthongs are all still fronting diphthongs, and the A is a iteration on the historical ia. And then finally, we've got some Proto-Kuki-Chin monophthongs that diphthongize in Kanise, and these are all involve the historical velar codas. So o and ua merge once again here, but they become ao when the historical coda was velar. And so here we get a source for the nasalized diphthong because it was conditioned by a nasal coda. So if it was ong or uang, then we get ao, and if it was oral, o or ua, then we get the oral vowel. And that's the case for E, which also diphthongized to A before these velar codas, and we get the same pattern, nasalization conditioned by the historical nasal coda. And for U before velars, which is a symmetrical pattern, where O was, the diphthongization was triggered by these velar codas. So those are nice and symmetrical, and we see a clear effect of the historical velar place of articulation in birthing some of these new diphthongs in Kanise. So to summarize the origins of these diphthongs, then, the top three are the continuation of fronting diphthongs from Proto-Kuki-Chin, and then and there's a reason why those never appear nasalized or in modern Kanise. It's because there is no historical origin for that. Because these all had a different coda, E or ul in some cases. Whereas for the rest of the diphthongs down here that they all could be found historically with oral or nasal codas. So this explains the distributional restriction that was kind of that seemed sort of, well, we had no explanation for it at first. So now it's all become clear. We expect the at the bottom there is probably an iteration on the central vowel, but that itself is already an innovation, and there aren't that many examples. So we still need to do some more work in tracking the history of the central vowels in Kanise. So that's all. I think we're right on time.